A young man had worked for a company that wasn't quite ethical. He led a life that was fine for living alone, and he didn't have any special talents besides gaming, which he used for emotional support. Even after being reincarnated into another world, he still found himself holding a controller just the same. In his past life, he heard a commotion as he was heading to his apartment. Just then, a girl came hurling down the stairs, accidentally knocking him over along the way. That was the end for him, and he died. What better way to go, right? When he woke up, he was an old man. He woke up with a throbbing pain in his head after he bumped into a dekoban, a delicious fruit with a tough skin. The old man was an adventurer, but his jobs were all mundane, such as herb picking. Since waking up in that body, the young man learned about the old man's past. He was kicked out as one less mouth to feed when he was young. Then, he registered with the guild after arriving at the capital. He strived to succeed as an adventurer, and he even had companions to chase dreams with. However, no matter how hard he tried, those people eventually left, and the dreams were long forgotten. Now the young man had inherited this life. However, the memories of his former life weren't particularly useful. After all, he was a mediocre person back then. In the end, nothing had changed, except for one. He had a special skill called game. As the name suggests, it allowed him to play a game anytime, anywhere. There was only one game he could play, and his goal in the said game was to enjoy life in a territory. It included farming and fishing, as well as alchemy, crafting equipment, and other activities. Having skills wasn't rare in this world, but game was quite special. The old man didn't understand it and never used it. But the young man was different, as he was capable of playing it. He thought it was nice to be able to use the skill. However, the elegant life was only in the game, and in reality, it was about earning daily wages and staying in cheap inns. Those unstable days had continued for over 10 years. Until one night, he had a strange dream. He saw himself in his previous body, dressed like his character in the game. He saw himself pointing at something on a screen, but he wasn't able to make sense of it. Just then, he woke up, making him wonder if he had fallen asleep while playing the game. He quickly sat on the bed thinking that the dream was quite strange. He recalled the images on the screen, and he was sure that it was inside the town hall, the trade corner to be exact. Curious, he opened it in the game, wanting to verify it. According to the game instructions, this was where he could trade his items with other players. To trade posts, he must decide on a price for the item he wanted to sell, then write it on the bulletin board. Other players who saw the board may agree to trade. After that, the transaction would be completed. He had never seen another player before, so he had never even opened the trade screen. Nevertheless, he still gave it a try. The game told him to enter the selling price, and he thought long and hard about it. It was just a game after all, so he set it at the lowest price of 3L. After that, the game immediately announced that the apples were up for sale. He was amazed, realizing that this is how it showed up on the bulletin board. The screen asked him if he wanted to buy an apple for 3L, making him wonder what the point was of buying an apple he was selling to himself. He thought it was just 3L anyway, so he said yes. Just then, the screen informed him that his balance was insufficient and he had to insert some money. To his shock, a coin slot appeared on his console, to which he inserted some coins. The game then informed him that the transaction was complete. An actual apple appeared on the table beside him, leaving him stunned. At that moment, his once dark days seemed to finally gather light. He held the apple close to his face, crying as he realized what this could mean. That night, he thought to himself that he should have realized it sooner. The apple bought in the game was tastier than any apple he had eaten before. The man knew that selling the items he gathered in the game could be profitable, and that was why he came to the commercial guild. Just then, a woman entered the room, apologizing for keeping him waiting. The woman informed him that she was in charge of fresh food, and she asked if it was alright for her to taste the apples he wanted to sell. The man quickly agreed, and as expected, the woman was shocked by the apple's sweetness. He smirked as he saw her reaction, thinking that his honey-filled apples would surely be famous compared to the mainstream sour ones. The woman quickly wrote 3,000 L on a check, telling him to take it to the reception. The man was shocked to see such an amount. This meant that each apple literally sold for 300 L per piece. That was the same price that a consumer would pay for a normal apple when buying. This could also mean that each apple was sold for 2 to 3 times the price in the market. Just then, the woman told him to exclusively sell to them the next time, and they would buy it for 500 L each. She urged him to hurry, and he immediately said yes to the offer. The next day, the man returned to the commercial guild with a barrel full of apples. The woman didn't think he would come the very next day, which somehow made the man a bit conscious. He asked the woman if it was a bad move, but she made it clear that it wasn't at all. She then wrote a check of 2,500 L, which meant that each apple cost 500 L. Just then, the woman asked for the man's name, and he replied that it's Akion. The woman introduced herself as Liberia, and she looked forward to working with him. Akion was stunned when Liberia mentioned his name. Not even at the Adventurers Guild registration was he paid much attention to. Even now that he was an old man, it was the same routine of checking the registration badge and quest tag before getting the reward. But now, his name was called, and he finally felt acknowledged as an individual in this world. Damn, my boy felt seen. As Akion went to the marketplace, he felt like his steps were lighter than usual. He thought it was too early to return to the inn, so he looked for something else to do. Just then, he saw a bunch of orphans gathered in a corner. It was a common scene, and they were probably sent there just like him to reduce the number of mouths to feed. Despite feeling sorry, Akion hadn't been able to do anything until now. He felt different that day, and he decided to do something about it. He approached the orphans, asking them if they would eat some apples if he gave them some. The orphans quickly took the offer, munching on them as fast as they could. Akion asked if they had just arrived, if they had any place to sleep, or if they had other plans. He asked again if they intended to live in town, but the orphans only kept quiet. Suddenly, Akion came up with a viable solution. They should just call themselves adventurers in the meantime. After that, Akion had the 3 orphans register at the Adventurers Guild. While they were doing that, he purchased bags for each of them. He then taught them to gather herbs, informing them that they could sell them in return. And so the orphans did as they were told, and they gathered herbs diligently. For the time being, Akion thought they could get by doing that. Later that day, he brought the orphans to a nearby inn, telling them it was the cheapest place for them to stay. As soon as they were settled in their room, he bid them goodbye, hoping that they would do their best from then on out. Before he left, the orphans finally spoke, thanking Akion for his kindness. He was caught by surprise, only realizing that they were just mere children. Ever since Akion realized the true essence of the skill, his life had become much more fulfilling. One day, he approached Liberia at the guild, delivering her apples for the week. She inspected the apples, then thanked Akion for the delivery. As an adventurer, he used to earn about 7,000 L a week without a day off. But now, with the game, he could earn about 25,000 L in a week. He sometimes thought about quitting being an adventurer, but it wasn't in his nature to do so. If he had a day off, he would start to feel uneasy. For the record, he was still staying in the cheapest lodging in the royal capital. It was only available until morning, and daytime use cost extra. He thought about buying a house, but it was irrational because he needed to save up more for it. If he produced more apples, there was also a risk that the surplus would drive the price down. Then the income from adventuring wouldn't seem so insignificant. At that moment, Akion thought about going to the forest. He headed to the royal capital where there was a vast forest where he could pick medicinal herbs. This was usually the first job adventurers learn. Wanting something to be busy with, Akion picked some herbs which would earn him 1,000 L per bag. The materials for alchemy found deeper in the forest sell for a lot, but the risk of monsters is high. If he could just turn the herbs he had into potions, then he could earn more than he already did. Unfortunately, he couldn't make potions in games because there were no herbs to start with. Just then, Akion realized that it might not be impossible to do so. He checked the game, recalling that he had only ever bought from it. Perhaps he could try selling to it too. The game told him to enter the name, quantity, and price of the item that he wanted to buy. He then quickly entered the information needed to buy 1 bag of herbs for 1,000 L. To his surprise, the bag of herbs he picked suddenly disappeared. The character in the game then announced that he got the herbs, earning Akion the recipe for a lower-grade healing potion. Just then, the character tried crafting something, and not long after, a basic healing potion was completed. Akion jumped with joy, knowing his goal had been achieved. That night, he gathered a few bottles of the potion. He wondered where he could sell them, and he estimated that each would cost about 150 L per bottle. Potions were mainly used by the military, hospitals, and adventurers. The former most likely had their own alchemists, so he might try selling his potions to the Adventurer Guild instead. Just then, Akion heard some chattering by the door. He opened it and saw the orphans, seemingly shy that they were caught. He immediately offered some leftover apples, and they were happy to receive them. They thanked Akion, and he merely replied that sharing with others made him feel good. The very next day, Akion headed to the Adventurers Guild. There, the merchant asked if he was going to do a buyback that early, and he bashfully said yes. Akion then sold the healing potions, and the merchant immediately performed the appraisal. She confirmed that they were basic healing potions, and she would take them for 300 L each, for a total of 2,700 L for 9 bottles. She asked if this was okay with him, and Akion immediately said yes. At that moment, Akion analyzed that the profit margin from the game was 150 L per bottle, making a total profit of 1,350 L. Considering the effort it took to gather herbs, it didn't seem very profitable. However, if he could grow herbs in the game's farm, perhaps it would be possible, although at the moment only vegetables were on the farm. Just then, the merchant asked Akion if he had become an alchemist. He said no, explaining that he only happened to figure out how to make potions. The merchant was amazed, believing that his hard work had finally paid off after coming to the guild for so long. However, instead of being proud, Akion felt guilty about the way she described the situation. The merchant then shared that it was a big help for the guild that he had learned alchemy. The alchemists they used to rely on became exclusive to the hospital's workshop. And on top of that, the popularity of the dungeon in the Westtown made them struggle to find enough potions. Just then, she handed Akion a check of 2,700 L, asking him to continue helping them. She also added that they welcomed as many potions as he could provide. Akion felt something warm within him, realizing that he had been asked to help. Akion had made up his mind. It was time to begin mass-producing healing potions. His thoughts briefly wandered to his earlier encounter with that persistent merchant and how she had nearly cracked the code. Indeed, she was hard to handle. Shaking the thought away, he refocused on his mission. Even if he changed all the fields in the game into medicinal herbs, it was not like the results would be guaranteed to be good. For now, he resorted to securing more manpower. But then again, he didn't have any adventurer acquaintances to ask for help from. As he stood in thought, a small group of children happened to pass by. In that moment, a spark of inspiration struck him. In this town, many children had to work due to being orphaned or to lessen the burden on their families. Most of them earned their daily bread by picking medicinal herbs. Just like Akion himself, he was convinced that it wouldn't be a bad idea to ask them for help. Just then, he approached the children, but they didn't seem pleased with him. They wanted him to get to the point because they were in a hurry to get to the guild. Despite the children's foul mouths, Akion still asked them to sell herbs to him for 100 L per bag. He added that they would only earn 1,000 L in the guild, but he thought it wouldn't be such a bad deal for them to sell it to him instead. The children's mouths widened in surprise and they made a deal with Akion. Akion then offered to buy all the bags for 500 L and they agreed. As they received their earnings, the children jumped with joy and planned to get something to eat. Later that night, Akion went to a secluded part of the forest. He recalled that low-grade healing potions sold for 300 L each, and he made 60 bottles this time. This meant that he would earn a total of 18,000 L. However, taking into account the expenses for buying from the game and herbs, it would come to 14,500 L. The profit was 3,500 L, which was quite mediocre. Not long after, he decided to go home, but he found the gates locked. He forgot that the royal capital had closed, not allowing him to enter. Left with no choice, he made his way back into the forest. There, he started a small fire to keep warm. As the flames flickered in front of him, he found himself reflecting. When was the last time he got so absorbed in a game that he completely lost track of time? Just then, he remembered something, and now was the perfect time to do it. The game's crafting feature included a cooking option as well, but the food turned out to be just decorative items. He wondered what he should do if it turned out to be like a food sample. However, he still gave it a try and bought it for the meantime. He found himself intrigued by the morning set meal, which cost 300 L. Akion realized that it was the equivalent of 2 meat sandwiches, but if he thought about it as Japanese food, it would be an absolute bargain. The game asked if he wanted to buy the morning set meal for 300 L, and he clicked yes. To his surprise, the meal materialized in front of him, leaving him in awe. Without wasting time, he immediately dug in. The saltiness of the grilled salmon was just right, and the sweetness of the rice was perfect to eat along with it. The umami of the miso soup also melted in his mouth along with the tofu. At that moment, Akion thought that his previous life before reincarnating had nothing in it, but it now seemed like food carried deep nostalgia. He sobbed as he ate the food, knowing it was that good. After eating, Akion expressed his gratitude, as he was very happy with it. Just then, a woman's voice called out to him. Akion was shocked to hear a woman's voice in the forest, and he asked who it might be. Suddenly, a noblewoman appeared before him, telling him not to be surprised. The woman introduced herself as Fomeri Taranstrea, the Grand Duchess. Akion nervously asked if she belonged to the nobility, which left Fomeri genuinely surprised that he didn't recognize her name. Panic rose within him. After all, in his life as an old man, he had never once interacted with nobles or mingled with them at all. Fomeri went on to explain, rather disappointedly, that she was the third daughter of Ryu, the founding king who had established the Belstein Kingdom. She seemed almost insulted that a commoner like him would not know such a basic piece of history. Akion immediately dropped to the ground and bowed his head low, apologizing profusely and acknowledging the grave mistake of angering a noble lady. Just then, Fomeri told him she'd had enough and forced him to raise his head. Akion thanked her, but his relief quickly turned into fear when he saw that her feet were missing. Bro was so polite he forgot to check for a shadow. Fomeri was convinced that he seemed ignorant, so she insisted on educating him. Her father, the great King Ryu, had lived more than 300 years ago. which led Akion to the unnerving realization that Fomeri herself might also be from that same ancient era. She declared that she excelled in magic and had mastered the secret art of immortality. Hearing that, Akion's mind raced. Was she some sort of lich or overlord? Fomeri then told Akion that there was no need to be afraid. It was not as if she desired to suck out his life force or something like that. Then, shifting the subject, she brought up something she had noticed. Akion had used a skill to produce an item that intrigued her. Suddenly, Akion tensed, realizing that this could be bad. She had seen him do it. Fomeri recalled that one of the items he had produced was rice, and when he confirmed it, her expression brightened. She confessed that she approached him because she wanted some of it. Her father always wanted to try rice, and she wondered if Akion would be so kind as to produce more. Out of fear, Akion immediately produced rice for Fomeri. When the rice was ready, Fomeri observed it with fascination and deep interest. She then told him to wait for a moment and without warning, vanished into thin air. Shortly after, she returned with a reward for Akion. When he asked what it was, Fomeri only offered a vague explanation, that it was something good, something he would understand once he consumed it. Before he could ask further questions, she bid him farewell. But just before leaving, she offered a cryptic piece of advice, that it would be wise for him to prepare his rain gear as soon as possible. Then, with a final glance and a mysterious smile, she told him that his actions had greatly pleased the founding king. True to her words, it began raining that night. Akion was smart enough to take her warning seriously, and he quickly rented a tent to keep himself dry. However, it came at a cost. 500L, which significantly cut into the profit he had hoped to make by selling potions. He then looked at the reward that Fomeri gave him, wondering what he should do with it. He wondered if he should eat it or try raising it in the game. Although the fact that it was given to him by the immortal queen made it a bit scary. Then again, Fomeri did express gratitude, so it was probably not something bad. After a long moment of reflection, Akion decided on a course of action. He would multiply it. For now, he needed to explore every possibility the game had to offer. He processed the item in the game and its name was revealed, the golden fruit. To his disappointment, it was valued at just 1L. He was disappointed by how cheap it was, but it couldn't be helped. Just then, the game asked if he wanted to sell the golden fruit for 1L, and with a resigned sigh, he sadly clicked yes. Akion thought that it was possible to set the selling price to the maximum and withdraw a large sum of money, but it would somehow feel like cheating. It was not really a big deal if he lost out in the game anyway, because he didn't plan to play too seriously. He was more suited for playing at a normal or easy level. As he watched, something remarkable happened. The golden fruit sprouted before his eyes, and not just that, he noticed that the herbs he had been growing were also doing well. Encouraged by this progress, Akion felt it was time to take on a task again, something he hadn't done in a while. The game had started crafting something for him, and he sat there thinking, reflecting on where to go from here. His current goal was to upgrade his living situation. If he were just going to live idly, selling apples once a week would be enough. But was that really okay? Akion knew deep down what he really wanted to do. Just then, the game notified him that the adventurer's equipment had been completed. Akion was caught by surprise, wondering why the game suggested being an adventurer. In this world, adventurers who were not skilled in combat were called Iron Rank adventurers, and they were treated the same as day laborers. Akion was one of those people. It wasn't that being an Iron Rank adventurer was bad, but neither he nor the old man could laugh about it. Surely they weren't enjoying it. However, he could now say that their efforts were paying off. As Akion stayed in his tent that night, he realized how deeply he wanted to be recognized by someone. He recalled Liberia and the merchant from the guild, expressing how they wanted to work with him and needed his help. Now that he realized what his game skill could do, he wondered if this was the chance to do just that. If he didn't use such a tremendous power rushing forward, then could he truly say he was aiming for anything meaningful at all? Just then, Akion wondered if adventuring always involved dungeons. Later that night, he dreamt of the first time the old man faced a goblin. It was during the caravan escort mission. The team was made up of 2 veterans and 3 newbie adventurers as lookouts. One of the members urged the others to tackle a dungeon together after they finished the mission, and they all agreed. However, the old man failed, and unlike everyone else, he couldn't take a single step forward in front of a goblin. After the mission ended, one of the senior adventurers praised 2 of the rookies for their potential and even offered them a spot on his team. The old man was silently kicked out of the group because of his incompetence, and since then he hasn't spoken to the 2. He only saw them once wearing fancy armor, and neither initiated a conversation. Those 2 moved forward, and some, like the old man, were left behind. It was a painfully sharp realization, and there were many things that the old man shouldn't remember. Just then, Akion woke up from the dream, cursing as he vowed to show the others what he was capable of. 1 week later, Akion went to the Adventurer Guild's training ground. He struggled to keep up, but he made it through somehow. As he took a break, an adventurer approached him, jokingly referring to him as an old-timer. The adventurer was the battle training instructor at the guild, and he was an adventurer who had retired due to losing an eye. The adventurer mentioned that Akion seemed to be doing well as he started making potions and buying herbs from kids. Akion felt a rush of nervousness. He hadn't expected his side hustle to get around so easily. While he barely knew what most people were up to, this guy had clearly been paying attention. Just then, the adventurer said that if Akion were an alchemist, then he didn't need to go outside. This left him wondering why he was now learning weapons out of nowhere. Akion nervously explained that he was reminded of how it felt when he was younger, making the adventurer laugh hysterically. The adventurer apologized for laughing, then he reminded Akion not to do anything reckless. Akion sighed and agreed, but then his attention was drawn to a woman in the crowd. Akion found himself quietly observing a group of adventurers gathered near the training grounds, wondering who they were. The training instructor didn't know either, and it didn't seem like they were new faces. They looked like they spent a lot on their clothes, which made Akion guess they were related to some nobility. But then again, this didn't concern him, so he went on with his day. After that, Akion left the training grounds and he decided to head to the bathhouse to wash off the sweat before going to the inn. After that, he wondered what he should have for dinner. Just then, his thoughts were interrupted when a bunch of kids asked if he wanted to buy some herbs. Akion said yes and even bought everything the children had. However, he couldn't carry all of them, so he asked the children to take the herbs to the inn. In that moment, Akion came to a quiet realization. He genuinely wanted those kids to succeed. Whether they grew into skilled adventurers or simply found stable ways to support themselves, he hoped they'd find a path toward independence. He even gained the stature to think about such things in a pretentious way, even though he was still living in a cheap inn himself. Nevertheless, Akion reminded himself that recalling his youthful spirit didn't mean he should let his actions and thoughts be swayed by emotions. After all, this didn't seem very adult-like. Just then, one of the children expressed his gratitude to Akion. Apparently, it was thanks to his herb purchases that they were able to buy weapons. Akion realized that he couldn't be outdone either, so he immediately went to work. He returned to potion crafting, harvested and maintained his crops, went fishing, and completed every job he could line up. The hours passed quickly, the steady rhythm of in-game work consuming his full attention. By the time he looked up, it was already late. Stepping out to grab dinner felt like too much of a chore now. He briefly considered pulling something directly from the game like he did last time. He had managed to get a morning set before, so maybe this time he could go for a pork cutlet or something. That's when a thought flickered through his mind. The golden fruit that Lady Falmeri had gifted him. He suspected it was already ripe, and as he checked the game, he guessed it right. However, it took a week for the fruit to grow, and that was quite long compared to other crops. For now, he planned to take it out. When he finally held it in his hand, he noticed that they looked like 2 golden orbs. Although they looked odd, he popped them in his mouth without hesitation. The rich sweetness filled his mouth, and a pleasant tartness tingled his palate. It was delicious, like the high-quality cherries he received as a gift in his previous life. Akion chuckled, realizing he was worried over nothing. Just then, Akion's world stopped as he noticed something. He heard a noise coming directly from his mind, telling him congratulations. The sound told him he gained the status strength +1 and acquired the skill Nightmare Daywalker. Akion freaked out, asking what just happened. At that moment, he also recalled that a daywalker was a vampire. Then, as if on cue, he started growing fangs. He asked for a skill, not a Twilight spin-off arc. The next day, Akion cautiously stepped outside, but he soon realized there was no problem being in the sunlight. They said daywalkers were vampires who didn't fear the sun, but scary things were still scary. On the bright side, his impressive fangs disappeared by morning. Just then, Akion decided to return to the forest to look for Lady Falmeri. When he arrived there, he noticed that there seemed to be more people around than usual. It must be because the herbs in the forest were flourishing after the recent rain. If he remembered correctly, the area where Lady Falmeri found him was just around the corner. He called out to her, but there was no response. Suddenly he remembered that the last time they met was at night, so he decided to wait instead. However, night came and she still didn't appear, leading Akion to think that she wasn't there after all. Then, out of nowhere, Lady Falmeri appeared, startling Akion. She was annoyed by his reaction since he summoned her in the first place. Akion then explained that sneaking up behind him like that could be bad for his heart. Lady Falmeri went straight to the point, asking what Akion wanted with her. He hesitated but eventually explained everything that happened after consuming the reward she gave him. Lady Falmeri found the event interesting, but Akion begged to differ. He grew fangs and he wasn't human anymore. Lady Falmeri then explained to him that the fruit was called the god's unintentional love, and it was said to bestow various things when eaten. Most of the time, it only slightly enhanced abilities, but there was a 1 in a billion chance that it could grant a skill. Akion was confused, since being a vampire was more like a race than a skill. Lady Falmeri groaned, saying it was such a hassle to explain. She then summoned a seal, making Akion question what it was. Lady Falmeri didn't bother to explain and instead told him to accept it. Akion asked what she did, and Lady Falmeri simply said that she granted him magic. Akion was shocked, but Lady Falmeri shrugged off his reaction and told him to say appraise. Akion did as he was told, and his stats immediately appeared. He felt a bit uncomfortable, and without notice, the screen suddenly disappeared. Just then, Lady Falmeri started laughing hysterically, saying that his stats were way too slow. He even ran out of magic just from appraising. Akion felt a bit embarrassed, asking if it was really that bad. Lady Falmeri then told him that having it in his skill list meant that he could use the power of a vampire whenever he wanted. As he could see from the appraisal, his race was still human. Akion was worried that he could only drink blood, so he hadn't eaten anything since the previous night. Having heard the good news, he was glad to know that he could still eat pork cutlet meals. Lady Falmeri encouraged him to do just that, but of course, she also wanted him to include portions for her and her father as well. Not long after, Akion produced a pork cutlet meal set for Lady Falmeri, costing him 350 L. Lady Falmeri said that this settled the consultation fee, but the magic was still a debt he owed. She would work for her one day, so until then, he should train as much as he could. Turns out it wasn't a gift. It was a subscription plan. Just then, she vanished. Meanwhile, Akion wondered if Lady Falmeri knew that he could increase his stats. Not long after, it rained again, so Akion set up his tent. Inside, he enjoyed a hearty meal. The combination of relief and hunger with the rich sauce and mustard hit the spot perfectly. Thanks to eating the golden cherries, Akion's stats gradually increased. However, he was still nowhere near the level of the Adventurer Guild instructor. Even if he were in a rush, the stat increases were random, so he had no choice but to take it easy and sell potions. One day, as he was in the market, the woman he noticed in the guild approached him, asking if he recognized the man in the poster she was holding. Just then, he was shocked when he saw the amount listed in the wanted poster, 5 million. The woman aggressively asked him again, and Akion replied that he didn't know the man and was just shocked by the amount in the poster. The woman calmed down and she told Akion that if he were blinded by the money, he should memorize the wanted man's face. Akion took the poster, realizing that the man looked oddly familiar. The woman then informed him that they would pay the full amount even for a corpse and would compensate well for any information provided. Akion thought they were being very generous. Then he curiously asked what the man did to begin with. The woman's hand curled into a fist, then she revealed that he had killed her brother. Akion was stunned, uneasy about what to say next. Not long after, the woman left and Akion was finally able to breathe from the scary encounter. At that moment, Akion thought that revenge felt like something out of a period drama. Before he was reincarnated, he was all alone, and even after reincarnation, he was just another mouth to feed. Maybe that was why he never really understood family bonds. He then wondered if he would understand the woman if he had a family. However, he knew that losing them would make him look like her, so perhaps it was better not to have any. It was also pointless for a guy who didn't get any romantic attention to worry about things like that. After that incident, Akion decided to switch gears and head to the bulletin board. He was trying to look cool while checking it out, but all he could actually do was things like sewer cleaning or helping with chores. He really wanted to go outside the city to escort caravans or explore dungeons, but his skills were still lacking. Just then, someone asked him if he was looking for work. It was an adventurer mentioning that it had been a while since they last met. Akion seemed puzzled, so the adventurer asked if he didn't remember him. Just then, Akion recognized the adventurer from Windcutter. A long time ago, he took a job helping these guys with their expedition supplies. Akion then asked if they had come back from a dungeon expedition, and the adventurer proudly confirmed it. Just then, the adventurer mentioned that resting was like losing money and getting out of shape, so they decided to take a job. He pointed at a task on the bulletin board, telling Akion that the reward would be 9,000 L, split 5 ways. All he needed to do was keep watch, and there was no danger pay. The task was a caravan escort mission, and it needed a minimum of 5 people. Akion realized that the group only wanted to use him to make up the numbers. They probably thought it was better to have someone they knew rather than a strong adventurer they couldn't coordinate with. Akion understood, but it felt a bit complicated. Including the return trip, it was 1,500 L per day, and given his game skills, it was not really a lucrative job. At that moment, Akion decided to participate in the mission. The adventurer was glad to hear it, and he insisted on registering them right away. Meanwhile, Akion thought that this mission was better than just walking or sitting around. After that, they decided to meet at the city gate the next morning. Later that day, Akion set out to sell the apples and a new fruit to the guild, knowing that he would be leaving the city for a while. As Liberia took a bite of the new fruit, she immediately turned ecstatic. She liked it so much that she decided to buy the whole bunch for 2,000 L. Akion was shocked, as this was 4 times the price of apples. Liberia told Akion that his apples were actually hugely popular among nobles and wealthy folks. She was sure that the batch of grapes he delivered would definitely be the same. As Akion left, he was glad to know that it was those kinds of crowds that bought his apples. After that, he bought some preserved food and some herbs from the kids, and he also told the orphaned girls that he would be away. That night, Akion enjoyed a hamburger meal, costing him 200 L. It was a bit late to realize, but dishes with soda and lots of oil were truly a luxury. As Akion munched on his burger, he mentally reminded himself to watch his weight. As he gulped down his drink, he heard someone by the doorway and figured out that the kids were back. As he came to think of it, they said they started taking copywriting jobs. In this world, replication and printing technology were still underdeveloped, so books were very valuable. On top of that, literacy rates weren't that high. Akion had worked hard to learn after being reincarnated, and he didn't know there was a job like copywriting. Those little kids were trying new jobs, making him realize just how lazy he had been. He was in awe of their determination, as if they were shining brightly. However, it was too late to dwell on what could have been, as he needed to prepare for the next day. In-game, players could create weapons and armor, and they also had NPC adventurers equip them for monster hunting and material gathering. Fortunately, after 5 years of grinding, Akion had plenty of strong gear. He didn't know what could happen out there, but rare items might be risky, so he decided to go with gear that ensured his safety. Shortly after, he finished packing his necessities for the mission. That night, he ate his usual golden cherries, and it was still noisy in his head when he consumed them. Not long after, he went to bed early. The next day, Akion arrived earlier than the adventurers. The leader apologized for making him wait, then pointed out how nice Akion's gear was. After that, the leader urged everyone to head to the escort target's wagon. Akion recognized that it was from a famous store's wagon, but it seemed like the load was awfully small. Usually, they would load the wagon until it was full, but there was nothing else in it except for a single barrel. The leader introduced the Windbreaker team to the coachman, informing him that they would be the escorts for the trip. The coachman had been waiting for them and they would now depart. He urged everyone to get on the wagon and they immediately complied. Meanwhile, Akion was still wondering why this was all the cargo they had. Suddenly, the coachman recognized Akion, then went on to say that he was Wizard. Akion was shocked, recalling that Wizard was his first companion. He was not a mere comrade, but an actual life companion. However, it didn't make sense to Akion because Wizard was supposed to have been successful as an adventurer after escorting the caravan. Akion asked when he was there and Wizard explained that a lot had happened. Now he was stuck in that situation. Akion was at a loss for words, merely recognizing Wizard's answer. Suddenly a man shouted at Wizard and Akion, telling them to stop chatting and get moving. He then ordered Akion to head to the wagon and without hesitation Akion obeyed. As he walked away he caught a glimpse of Wizard's wooden leg. That's when it clicked. This was why Wizard had quit being an adventurer. Shortly after, the journey began. As they traveled, Akion tried convincing himself not to think too deeply about Wizard. Just then, an adventurer started talking to him, guessing that he and the guy with one leg were acquaintances. Akion recognized the adventurer as the archer from the Windcutter. Then he confirmed his guess. Just then, the archer flashed his stitched-up hand before Akion, sharing that he lost all of his fingers during a fight in a dungeon. For an archer, the dominant hand was life itself, so he spent all his savings on treatment. He then asked Akion what he thought happened to adventurers with no savings and no ability to work. The archer thought about Wizard, convinced he was lucky to have another job lined up. Dungeons were profitable but also very dangerous. What happened to Wizard was nothing but a common story. Akion thought the archer was trying to comfort him, but then he revealed how envious he was that the archer was able to challenge dungeons. The archer grinned, saying that Akion was saying some childish things. In reality, Akion's feelings towards Wizard were just surprising. That realization of his skill's potential made him want to move forward like a child. After all, there was no time to look back. Later on, the group decided to camp for the night. They then secured the horses nearby and proceeded with their tasks. Everyone had prepared the camp, had a simple meal, and had decided on the watch shifts. The leader of the Windcutters asked Akion to take the shift from midnight to morning and he agreed. As Akion took the watch, he guessed that if goblins came down, they would probably be from the mountains. However, they weren't the only monsters that posed a threat. If he could recall, he was once told not to focus too much on one spot. That was what a senior adventurer taught him when he was starting out. Back then, the adventurer told him and the other rookies to use their ears and eyes to gather information in all directions. He was taught to move his head to see everything, even behind him. He was reminded of this, and so he told himself to do just that. Suddenly he heard something strange and he speculated that the direction of the noise was nearby. Just then, a group of ferocious goblins emerged from the bushes, and Akion immediately alerted the others. Once the adventurers heard, they immediately grabbed their weapons. Meanwhile, Akion tried to calm himself, knowing he had never defeated a monster before. But at that moment, he knew he had to do it. When a goblin came running towards him, Akion gathered all his courage, successfully impaling the creature with his spear. However, his joy was short-lived when he realized he had been surrounded by the other goblins. Just then, an arrow pierced the head of one of the goblins. When Akion looked up, he realized it was from the archer hiding among the trees and apologizing for the delay. The archer then told Akion to keep up his work, and he would cover him. Akion freaked out when he heard this, as it seemed like the archer wanted him to take care of the other goblins by himself. There were too many, and they needed to regroup. However, the archer was unfazed, looking at the horde of goblins who were struggling to attack them. As the goblins drew nearer, the archer told Akion to look out, leaving him with no choice but to fight. The fight went on, and the archer kept on telling Akion that he was doing great. Not long after, Akion found relief when he realized it was over. However, the archer only felt sorry to say that they couldn't rest yet. He pointed towards the distance, seemingly hinting that the worst was yet to come. After the encounter with the goblins, the leader of the Windcutters finally confirmed that they had most likely cleaned up. Just then, one of his comrades informed him there seemed to be a few more left, so they decided to provide support. However, the leader couldn't help but notice that there was something strange about the attack. Meanwhile, Akion recalled that there were goblins that usually moved in groups of 10, but this time, there were easily 10 times that number. Just then, the archer told him that he would pay him for the danger bonus. That being said, he wanted Akion to keep watching and be alert for more than just goblins. Akion was worried, as this could mean that there was a chance that this attack was orchestrated by someone. This made him wonder, what could those people possibly be after? Just then, someone called out to Akion, and it sounded like Wizard. It seemed like he was under attack, so he immediately ran toward the wagon to rescue him. To Akion's surprise, Wizard was being subdued by none other than the fugitive. Akion threatened the fugitive to stop, while mentally asking himself if this guy was the attacker. No shit, Sherlock. Suddenly, the rest of the group overheard the commotion from the wagon, leaving the fugitive no choice but to escape. Akion tried to stop him, but it was too late. Just then, the archer arrived, asking Akion if he was alright. He confirmed that he was, but he was more worried about Wizard. Wizard, on the other hand, reassured Akion that he was fine, and that he had only taken a kick to the chest. Akion was glad to hear this, but then he wondered if the guy was after the barrel. He grew more curious, asking himself what could be inside it. Even if Akion knew, it would only mean more trouble. Right then, he figured that his job might have been more complicated than he thought. After that, the group increased their vigilance due to the goblin attack and the man's presence. However, in the end, they reached the destination town without any other incidents. The leader of the Windcutters then handed Akion 9000L, noting that he had saved them. He also reassured the man that he would count on him for their future missions. After the group left, Akion set out to exchange the completion certificate for the reward at the guild. As he wondered how much the danger bonus could be, someone suddenly called out to him. It was Wizard, asking if they could go out for a drink. Akion swiftly rejected the offer, making excuses to leave as soon as possible. But before he could do so, Wizard suddenly asked if he resented him and the others. Bro, you literally traumatized him. Akion responded that he had in the past, but as long as they didn't meet, it would be fine. In the back of his mind, he was actually quite surprised that the answer came easily. Akion left without a word, leaving Wizard guilty. Meanwhile, Wizard knew that they were the first to leave Akion. Just then, someone approached him telling him to follow because they had to talk. Wizard then seethed under his breath, saying he shouldn't have listened to that idiot. As a group of soldiers stood before Wizard, he found relief in the thought that Akion didn't get dragged into his mess. Meanwhile, Akion was shocked to know that his reward was 14,000L. The base reward was 9000L with a 5000L danger bonus. Considering the return trip, he earned about 300L per day. Financially, it was better than collecting herbs, but considering the danger, it might not be worth it. If he wanted to earn more, he would have to hunt monsters or delve into dungeons, but that would mean facing even greater dangers. At that moment, Akion asked himself if that was really what he wanted. Just then, he realized that money wasn't everything for an adventurer. He then asked himself why he was even doing it in the first place. Truly, money was important for living, but if Akion focused too much on that, he might lose sight of what he wanted to do. He knew that all he really wanted was to enjoy being an adventurer. And so, his immediate goal had been set: to adventure safely and have fun. It felt like a contradiction, but he couldn't be bothered. For now, he decided to take a public carriage back to the capital. Suddenly, Liberia came running toward him, urging him to come to the reception room at once. To Akion's surprise, Lady Falmeri was waiting for him as she wanted to ask him for something. She needed him to deliver something to a designated location. Akion thought it seemed suspicious, so he nervously asked what she meant and why it was so sudden. Lady Falmeri then reminded him that he owed her for the magic she gave him, and now he had to work for her. Due to the nature of the delivery, Akion must transport it alone. With his current stats, there shouldn't be a problem. Akion grew even more tense, realizing that Lady Falmeri knew about his stats multiplying because of the golden cherries. Just then, he told her that it seemed like a big favor, considering the debt he owed. Suddenly, the guildmaster approached Lady Falmeri, asking if he could have a word with her. As they discussed matters in faint whispers, Akion awaited his fate. Lady Falmeri suddenly stood from her seat, telling Akion that if he succeeded in this task, she would upgrade his adventurer registration from iron to bronze. There were 4 adventurer ranks: gold, silver, bronze, and iron. One could move up based on achievements, but day labor adventurers like Akion were usually stuck in iron forever. Akion expressed how amazing the offer was, but he wasn't sure if his abilities were up to it. Just then, the guildmaster reassured Akion that the guild had no issue with it at all, shocking him. Lady Falmeri then flashed a threatening gaze over Akion, telling him that if he kept whining, she wouldn't be able to stay as kind as she had been. And just like that, he ended up accepting the task. As he carried on the mission, he complained at the thought that Lady Falmeri made him travel on foot. It was absurd, and the least she could do was provide a horse. The job was to deliver an egg up a mountain. Apparently, it was the egg of a dragon from an old legend and it was stolen. After many twists and turns, the egg was recovered and the kingdom was now protecting it. However, the problem was returning it back to the mountain. It seemed like a criminal organization was after it and they had sent several assassins. That was why the kingdom decided to send several couriers to return the egg, and Akion was one of those. No one really knew which egg was the real one. Back when Lady Falmeri gave him the task, Akion asked why the kingdom was going so far for the Dragon Lord. Lady Falmeri explained that long ago, when Belstein was still a small nation, a Dragon Lord suddenly appeared and began attacking the kingdom, his eyes filled with intense rage. The founding king Rio fought for 3 days and nights. When the battle finally came to an end, Rio didn't kill the dragon. When he listened, he learned that the Dragon Lord was searching for the one who had defiled his mate's corpse. And so, Rio made a proposal. He would find the culprit and bring them to the Dragon King. In exchange, he wanted the Dragon King to make a promise. If there was ever a problem on his end, the kingdom would handle it. But if any dragon caused trouble on their end, they would ask the Dragon King to handle it. And so, the Dragon Lord and the founding king, Rio, made a pact. Soon after, the incidents with dragons in the kingdom significantly decreased. There were still some incidents, but it worked out well for both sides. As Lady Falmeri's father used to say, after the rain, the earth hardens. At the present moment, Akion realized that King Rio must be Japanese. The saying referred to a Japanese proverb meaning that things become more solid after bad events. Now it made sense why the king craved a traditional Japanese meal. Akion thought about the founding king Rio, who had a prosperous kingdom, a beautiful immortal daughter, and many heroic stories. They shared the same background, yet their lives were very different. And so, with a tinge of envy, Akion continued his journey. Akion had a hunch for the past 2 days that he was being followed by assassins. As he continued his travel, he decided to take a break. But he reminded himself not to let his guard down. If he was being honest, he didn't really need a break. Thanks to the daywalker, his body didn't tire easily, allowing him to go without sleep. As he got settled for the night, he sensed people's presence from afar. In his head, he actually wanted to keep walking. Akion's role wasn't just to transport the egg, there was one more thing. He was bait to catch the assassins from the underground organization targeting the egg. The soldiers were supposed to take care of them when they saw an opening. However, Akion was worried because he couldn't sense the soldiers' presence at all. He wondered if he was overthinking that the soldiers might have been defeated by the assassins. But then again, maybe the soldiers were just too high level for him to detect. Carrying that anxiety, he eventually arrived at the foot of the mountain 2 days later. Akion was relieved, seeing that he was almost there. If he were his previous self, it would have taken him so much longer. His stats kept increasing because he ate golden cherries every day. As for his current stats, his strength was 32, vitality at 57, speed at 15, magic at 20, and luck at 3. They improved somewhat, but his biggest concern was that his luck wasn't increasing at all. Dude was literally bait and still wondered why. Just then, a voice called out to Akion. It was the fugitive, accompanied by his comrade. The fugitive warned Akion that if he didn't want to die, he should leave everything he had. Akion froze, recognizing the man from the wanted poster. He also recalled that it was the same person from the wagon. The comrade teased Ben, the fugitive, saying that he was famous. Akion grew curious, overhearing that the fugitive's name was Ben. Ben was one of Akian's first companions along with Wizard, and he was the strongest among them. Akian wondered why such a man would be a fugitive, as he would have risen so much higher by now. Akian accepted the situation, convinced that Ben couldn't make it. Then out of nowhere, Ben pierced his weapon through Akian, telling him to shut up. Ben was furious, asking Akian what he even knew. Convinced that he was dead, Ben and his comrade decided to grab the egg and escape. Ben had taken care of the ones in hiding, but there might be others around. However, as they opened the bag, they found that it was merely filled with grass. Ben annoyingly said it was a dud, while his comrade admitted he was hoping for something since Akian was fast, despite being weak. Ben thought that Akian was always a useless piece of trash, and as he came to think of it, they wouldn't entrust the real egg to him. Ben's comrade thought he was being a bit harsh, as Akian was his old companion. Just then, the comrade shared that, according to the informant, Akian had been making money with potions recently. Ben found it strange that Akian had been wearing leather armor, and it finally made sense. He was convinced that this good-for-nothing got cocky taking on such requests, and that was why this happened. Ben's comrade laughed, then asked if they should quickly grab his belongings. Meanwhile, Akian's game detected an emergency situation, activating the nightmare daywalker. Suddenly, Akian's fangs grew and he felt thirsty. When Ben's comrade checked Akian's belongings, he found that he had nothing valuable at all. There was no hole in his leather armor, so he suggested taking it instead. Meanwhile, Ben grew frustrated, wondering if he had stashed one significant item somewhere. He cursed under his breath, saying how much of a pain it was to come up empty-handed. The comrade then said that if they had stolen the item back at the wagon, they wouldn't have had this much trouble. Ben agreed, recalling that Wizard was the one who fed them the info. However, the coward betrayed them and got scared. The comrade chuckled, saying that everything would become a hassle when luck wasn't on their side. He asked if Ben agreed, but before Ben could respond, he found that his comrade's head had been severed. Guess luck ran out mid-sentence. His eyes widened, asking what had just happened. Suddenly, Akian laughed hysterically, asking what was with Ben's face. He asked if he dropped out, holding the severed head like it was a trophy. Ben stuttered while Akian asked if he didn't know what dropout meant. He went on to explain that it was for scums like Ben who trampled on others to climb up only to fall back down covered in filth. He pointed at Ben, making it clear it was what he was talking about. Ben sheathed his sword, saying he didn't need a freak like Akian to tell him that. He then swore to cut Akian's head clean off. Just then, Akian appeared behind him, casually holding the tip of his sword. Ben asked when Akian did this, but it was too late and his sword had been taken from him. Ben suddenly used his swift leg skill, making Akian ask if he was running away. After all that time looking down on him as dead weight and a useless piece of trash, was the great sword demon Ben really going to turn tail and run? Ben told him to shut up. He asked what was wrong with calling a guy who couldn't even break out of temp work a loser. Akian wouldn't understand how hard it was to keep aiming higher. He didn't understand how one mistake became bigger the higher one got, the humiliation of having to take any job just to survive. Akian, on the other hand, merely said that it was Ben's problem and not his. He really said it was a skill issue. Ben was stunned, but Akian continued, reminding him he was the one who threw him away and chose the life he had now. Akian loomed over him, reminding him of the quote, "Spilled water never returns to the bowl." Ben was horrified, and he pleaded with Akian to forgive him because he still had a daughter. Because of him, his daughter was at an orphanage in the royal capital. He fell from being an adventurer and got tricked by the underworld, yet he still fought for his daughter. If he kept this up, she would end up just like he and Akian used to be. There was no way he could abandon his family after being abandoned himself. Akian, of all people, should understand. However, Akian only called him an idiot, saying he didn't understand at all. He then recalled how Ben had killed someone's family too. No decent person would have a 5 million bounty on their head. As Ben kneeled before him, Akian pointed out how convenient it was for him to think that only his daughter deserved to be saved. Offended, Ben rushed toward Akian with his dagger, eager to kill him. Akian was unfazed, merely bidding Ben goodbye. On that day, Akian killed someone for the first time. A former friend of his had fallen into darkness. Akian was surprisingly calm after returning to normal. Self-defense? Retribution? He could find countless justifications if he tried. What bothered him was that he felt no guilt about having killed someone. He then wondered if it was because of the Nightwalker skill. Still, he wondered what was up with the cringy, edgy villain act. He tried to shrug off the thought, then recalled how Ben had turned to sludge and crumbled away after the attack. Only his head remained. As Akian stared at Ben's head, he recalled that vampires were supposed to turn their victims into one of their kind. He also wondered how he was even supposed to carry the head back. If he transported it as it would definitely rot. He heard of salting things, but he had never actually done it. Just then, he got a good idea. He put the head inside the game, though he never thought he'd put an actual human inside it. He was tense, but it actually worked. Using the trading system, he could store real-world items inside the game. Once saved as data, there was no risk of rotting or deterioration. It was truly convenient. Just then, Acheon remembered something that he had to take out, the Dragon Lord's egg. He was worried something might happen, so he preemptively stored the egg in the game as well. If he was being honest, he didn't think it was possible to even trade living things. He then remembered Lady Felmary's threat, telling him that if the egg suffered the slightest harm, his life wouldn't be enough to atone. Remembering that, Acheon thanked the skill he had. It looked like there weren't any enemies left nearby, so he decided to carry the rest on his own. He would rather not show the skill in front of the Dragon Lord. Suddenly, the Dragon Lord appeared behind him, asking him if he was the one sent by the king's daughter. Acheon froze, realizing he was in the presence of the Dragon Lord. The Dragon Lord told Acheon to return the egg, and he immediately handed it over. The Dragon Lord then made the egg float towards him, making Acheon wonder if he used telekinesis. As a reward for carrying the egg and slaying the thieves, the Dragon Lord gave Acheon an answer. He placed his giant claw on Acheon's forehead, peering into his mind. He then revealed to Acheon that the reason Ben turned to sludge and crumbled away was that he was not a suitable vessel to inherit the king's essence. If Acheon ever encountered one who didn't retain their form, he should do well to tread carefully. The Dragon Lord left shortly after, making Acheon think he was one strange king of the night. As he watched the beast disappear into the sky, he was horrified by the thought that he knew everything. Acheon was severely exhausted, and he decided to head home. He ended up running all the way back to the capital. Upon arriving, the merchant immediately greeted him, pointing out that he had made it back safely. She then told Acheon that Liberia had been asking to see him. It was something about the grapes being a big hit, and they sold out instantly. Acheon couldn't believe it. He still had plenty of grapes left, so once the sales stabilized, he would probably rent a place with a monthly contract like an apartment. Just then, the merchant asked if he was planning to sell potions. He hesitantly said no. Then he discreetly told the merchant he had something to discuss regarding a wanted notice. The merchant asked if he was serious, then went on to reveal that the client was a noble. If there was a mistake, it would be very bad for Acheon. Acheon stuttered, saying that they wouldn't know for sure unless they verified it with the person directly. Reluctantly, the merchant gave in and asked again if Acheon really wanted her to make the call. Acheon nodded, and the merchant sighed, grumbling about how serious he was. Later, the noblewoman arrived at the guild's meeting room to speak with Acheon. She immediately brought up the wanted notice, and the pressure she gave off made Acheon uneasy. Without a word, he placed a box on the table and opened it, revealing Ben's severed head. The noblewoman stared in shock, frozen in disbelief. One of her comrades insisted it was impossible. He didn't believe that someone like Acheon took down Ben the Demon Blade, and he accused him of being a liar who only schemed to claim the bounty. Acheon was disappointed, acknowledging he was truly a small-time adventurer. However, his attitude was still unpleasant. Honestly, he was at a point where he didn't even care about the bounty money. He apologized that this wasn't what they were looking for, then went on to close the box. However, the noblewoman took the head into her hands, longingly claiming it was indeed what she was searching for. She apologized for her subordinate's rudeness, then she promised to summon someone from the trade guild to handle the procedures. The subordinate was baffled, asking if she was seriously going to trust someone like Acheon. Just then, the noblewoman said that if this was the case, she would leave her subordinate to continue searching for the culprit. As for her, no matter what happened, she would take the head back. The subordinate apologized, and the noblewoman swiftly dismissed him. Witnessing the scene unfold, Acheon was horrified by the noblewoman. Later on, Acheon completed the procedures for the bounty money. Liberia told him to place his thumbprint as a seal of contract, and with that, the transaction was completed. She thanked Acheon for his hard work, then asked him to wait for a moment. As Acheon waited, the noblewoman approached him, calling him by his first name. She then bowed before him, introducing herself as Zara Gant Haklasra. She smiled at Acheon, telling him how grateful she was for his help. Shortly after, Liberia returned, still in disbelief that Acheon had captured the wanted criminal. Acheon, on the other hand, replied that he was more surprised that Liberia handled things other than fresh produce. She explained that she normally didn't, but she was the only one available to take care of the task at hand. She then cracked a joke, saying that in a way, a severed head was a type of fresh produce. She laughed and said she was kidding, but Acheon found it more concerning than funny. Liberia then told Acheon that the promissory note may not be very convenient for someone in his position. She recommended converting it into cash, and Acheon agreed. In that case, she suggested opening a trade guild bank account. If he left the fund management to them, they would ensure excellent returns. Acheon nervously accepted the offer, though he thought Liberia was starting to sound like a bank salesperson. Liberia thanked him, and they proceeded with the account setup. Just then, Acheon remembered something. He asked Liberia if it were possible to donate to an orphanage, recalling that the one in the royal capital was where Ben's daughter supposedly lived. Akion wasn't overwhelmed with guilt or anything, it just felt like the ghost of that old man urged him to do it. After taking care of various procedures, Akion ended up with 1,000 L left. He then charged it into the game and headed back to the inn. Once he got there, he immediately got to work. Ever since he returned to the royal capital, there had been something on his mind: testing out his appraisal skills. He said the magic word and found that Silent Step had been added to his skills just as he had expected. He previously found it odd that his footsteps suddenly became silent. He remembered that Ben's skill was Sprint, making him wonder if that nightmare daywalker allowed him to steal skills. However, he couldn't exactly test it by turning someone into sludge. As he tucked himself into bed that night, he wondered if he should just consider himself lucky. Still, something bugged him. He tried closing his eyes, but he eventually admitted that he just couldn't sleep. Bothered by his thoughts, he decided to drink for the first time in a while. He headed to town, knowing he couldn't create drinks in the game other than tea and juice. There he bought a bottle of alcohol, and the merchant shared that some shop apparently got dream fruit from an adventurer who came back from a dungeon. Because of that, there haven't been many customers that day. If Akion remembered correctly, a dream fruit was a pretty rare fruit that contained top-grade alcohol. Just then, the merchant asked if he wanted some dried meat to go with the alcohol, but Akion politely refused. He knew he could get snacks in the game for free. Not long after, he took the alcohol back to his room so he could drink at his own pace. He thought about drinking at the shop, but he would be alone anyway. He then wondered if drinking with companions made it taste better. That said, he had grapes, so it would be nice if he could make fruit wines. He had quite a stock of fruit, but there was only so much that he could sell. Then, out of nowhere, Akion sensed an incoming attack. Someone had swung their sword at him, but he was quick to dodge it. The attacker accused Akion of it being his fault that he was kicked out of the squad. As Akion observed closely, he realized it was the guy from Zira's team. He couldn't believe that he actually got abandoned, but then, he realized this was misplaced resentment. He was also in a public space, and he needed somewhere to hide. Akion ran into a dark alley while Zira's subordinate warned him that he couldn't run away so easily. Soon after, the subordinate found himself cornered by Akion in his vampire form. Later on, Akion went home to find that his skills had just increased. He didn't want to test it, but he was forced to. On top of that, he couldn't just leave a muddy corpse lying around in the middle of town. When he tried putting it into the game, he was informed that he had discovered a recipe for high-quality fertilizer. Imagine dying and your final contribution is helping some carrots grow. In any case, this confirmed that the Nightmare Daywalker allowed him to steal skills from opponents. Overwhelmed, he didn't feel like drinking anymore, so he put the alcohol in the game. Just then a quest popped up notifying him that the Find the Brewing method had been unlocked. He could also check the details at the guild office. Akion was confused, so he checked the guild office's request acceptance counter. He thought he had cleared every in-game quest, but he turned out to be wrong. For the brewing test, he was to collect the necessary items to add a brewery to his estate. Once completed, alcohol would be added to the crafting category. This required 10 pieces of Trentwood and 1 dream fruit. Those items couldn't be obtained within his territory or through adventurer dispatches, so he should look for them in trade. Akion knew that Trents were monsters found in dungeons, and so were dream fruits. He recalled these were items not obtained in the game, meaning he was supposed to go to a dungeon. A few days had passed since the quest was unlocked. Akion kept on selling potions and fruits, and he also went to the training center. Sometimes he gave his leftover fruit to the 3 girls who worked alone. He continued living his usual life, but deep down, he knew he had to resume the quest. Still, without a set deadline, he always ended up putting it off. According to Liberia from the Commercial Guild, neither Trentwood nor Drunken Dreamfruit were available in Royal City. Akion then recalled the merchant who had once sold him alcohol and regretted not taking the opportunity back then. With no other choice, he decided to go to the dungeon. Just as he made the decision, he sneezed and felt a little sick, so he told himself to go as soon as possible. Before long, he had all the items, luggage, and equipment ready. Without wasting time, he declared out loud that it was time to head to the Westtown dungeon. He said it to motivate himself, but then felt a little embarrassed. Just then, the coachman informed him that the carriage was about to depart. Since it would take 5 days to reach Westtown by carriage, Akion decided to run instead, curious how many days he could save. He told himself to do his best and kept running. Akion continued to play his game every day without fail. He couldn't relax unless he did. As he stopped for a moment to play, he caught a whiff of his stinky towel. Disgusted, he decided to wash it in the game. Recently, he had discovered a trick. When he moved items in and out of the game, they came out clean. However, it didn't fix damage, as seen in his worn leather armor. Speaking of daily routines, there was one more thing. Even though it was annoying, he ate golden cherries every day. His stats had improved significantly, and he acquired new skills. He was still a little short on luck, but overall he was satisfied. One day, after finishing his routine, he pushed himself for another round and kept running. In the end, he arrived in Westtown in only 3 days. His eyes widened in awe at the sight of the prosperous town. Then he immediately got to work and went to register at the Adventurers Guild. There, the attendant addressed him as a copper adventurer and handed him his verified registration card. She then asked if he planned on going to the dungeon since it was nearly winter. Akian said yes and asked what winter had to do with it. The attendant explained that while outdoor jobs decreased in winter due to the snow, dungeons weren't affected by seasons, so more people flocked there. Akian realized she had a point. The attendant then suggested making a long-term contract before all the inns were fully booked. She offered to introduce him to a guild-managed inn with a special deal, and Akian quickly accepted. Once he got settled, Akian made his way to the dungeon. On the way, he wondered if many people at the guild were good at sales. In hindsight, he felt lucky to get such a good deal. Soon, he saw the dungeon entrance owned by the lords and managed by the Adventurers Guild. There, adventurers were instructed to show their registration card at the reception desk before entering. First-timers would receive instructions and sign to agree to the terms. According to the terms, adventurers must show their registration card when entering and exiting the dungeon. If they failed to return within a month, they would be considered dead. Famous adventurers could apply for an extension, but otherwise any luggage or funds left at the inn would become guild property. After reading everything, Akian signed his name and the attendant reminded him to be careful. Finally, the dream Akian once gave up on had resumed. He passed through the dungeon gate and found himself in a maze. The sounds of battle echoed in the distance. He felt strange, like there was a heavy weight in his stomach, but his feet moved on their own. He couldn't stop. Not long after, he came face to face with 5 goblins, but they hadn't noticed him yet. Telling himself he could do it, he quickly wiped them out. Surprisingly, it was easier than he expected. Once defeated, the goblins vanished, leaving behind only a magic stone. Akian found it odd but kept the stone anyway. In this dungeon, monster corpses turned into magic stones. Many adventurers aimed to collect them to exchange for cash. Sometimes one could also find treasure materials, magic weapons, armor, and more. Akian wondered how far he could go just collecting stones, but then quickly called himself out. He was straying from his goal of having a safe, enjoyable adventure. He had to be careful not to overdo it. Just then, he found a portal, a return gate that existed on each floor. If he exited from there, he could later resume from that same floor using the entrance portal. Akian decided to take it easy for the day and return home. He thought of it like a save point in a game. Back in town, he cashed in the magic stones and received 3000L. He had fought goblins a total of 5 times, but the reward didn't seem worth the effort. If he wanted to make money, he had to go deeper into the dungeon. However, if the monster count increased, it might be too much for him to handle alone. Just then, he heard a commotion nearby. An adventurer was trying to team up with 2 girls, a wizard and a priest, but they didn't think he was good enough. Akian felt bad for the guy but didn't want to get involved. As he tried to walk away, the adventurer suddenly approached him, asking him to do something about the other team. Meanwhile, the wizard hid behind Akian, leaving him confused. Then, without warning, she and the priest disappeared. The adventurer got angry, blaming Akian for letting them escape. Out of nowhere, the adventurer swung his fist at Akian, forcing him to fight back. Calmly, Akian caught the man's punch with one hand and told him there was no need to go that far. The man, who was twice Akian's size, tried to push forward but was horrified by Akian's strength. In the end, he turned tail and ran. Akian was relieved as the guy knew when to back off. After that, Akian went to a diner for a light supper. Tired from the day, he went to bed early to prepare for the next one. The next morning, the wizard and the priest approached him. He recognized them right away and they immediately thanked him for his sacrifice. Akian replied indifferently, asking if he could help them. The wizard said she had been watching him and noticed how strong he was. A wizard and a priest made a promising and cute pair, and they wanted Akian to party with them. Akian wondered if he should really party up with a bunch of kids, but the thought of being used as a convenient shield bothered him. At his age, he knew better than to get his hopes up for nothing. He was about to reject the offer, but the wizard cut in, saying it was only for that day. Akian was caught off guard and he realized it felt awkward to refuse a request from a girl. Left with little choice, he agreed, much to the girl's delight. With that settled, they agreed to meet up later. Misha, the wizard, introduced herself to Akian. It might not have been obvious, but she was the 3rd daughter of a noble family. Her household had been built on meritocracy for generations, and she had come here to gain experience. Sis, the priestess, also introduced herself. She didn't say much, just that she was raised in a temple. Misha explained that she and Sis were magical friends from the same hometown, though their systems were different. Curious, Akian asked what she meant. Misha explained that magic had 2 main attributes, demonic and holy. Other attributes were created by mixing the 2. Roughly speaking, Misha was an offensive mage, while Sis specialized in support magic. Pure, unmixed magic was known as divine magic, but it didn't have a great reputation among the general public. As Misha went on to ramble, Akion couldn't help but notice how talkative she was, especially compared to Sis, who stayed mostly silent. Suddenly, Sis asked for Akion's name, calling him uncle. Akion quickly introduced himself, adding that he worked as a day laborer adventurer in the royal capital. Lately, he had decided to try out a few things, but he couldn't say much about the game, so that was all he could share. The girls remained quiet, clearly uninterested in his backstory. Now that introductions were done, Misha urged everyone to head for the dungeon, but Akion told them to wait. Misha was eager to leave right away, but he had noticed that both of them were rear guards. He told the girls he needed to return to the inn to change his gear. Not long after, he came back, apologizing for the delay. Misha was amazed by his mace and shield, and Akion looked proud of them. She reminded him that he had left behind a spear and a lot of items. If he died in the dungeon, the guild would confiscate everything. But Akion wasn't worried, knowing he had stored everything in the game and left nothing behind at the inn. With that, they entered the dungeon. As the journey went on, Akion wiped out countless goblins. The girls grew annoyed because he was taking down too many enemies by himself. Akion apologized, but Misha insisted he let them contribute too. At first everything went smoothly, but as they descended floor after floor, the variety of enemies and frequency of battles increased. During one fight, Akion called for Misha to fire upward and for Sis to cast protective magic. Suddenly a wolf leapt at Akion, but he managed to kill it with a swing of his mace. The creature instantly turned into magic stones, much to Akion's relief. He was amazed. He had just survived a battle that would have made most adventurers run for their lives. He stared at his powerful mace, realizing he still had plenty of time. His skill level had now surpassed even the guild instructors. He guessed his plan could work, and so they continued forward. Eventually, they reached the stairs to the 6th floor. Akion wanted to rest briefly before heading to the next level, but the girls suddenly erupted, saying they couldn't take it anymore. All they wanted now was to go home. Akion was baffled that they wanted to leave already, but the girls were firm. They didn't want to see another goblin anytime soon. Although it was already evening, Akion insisted he could still keep going. However, he knew it would be tough on the kids. He already had a decent amount of magic stones, so it may be time to call it a day. With that, he told the girls they were done for now, much to their delight. Upon returning to town, Akion immediately exchanged the magic stones for money. Each of them was supposed to receive 20,000 L. At that moment, Akion realized that the deeper he went into the dungeon, the more magic stones he could collect after each battle. At this rate, he was sure he'd earn even more the next day. Just then, the girls turned to Akion and said they'd see him again in 7 days. His world froze. He immediately demanded an explanation. Misha, unfazed, asked why he was so surprised. Then she explained that they were going to use their earnings to buy magic. She realized Akion didn't get it because he wasn't a wizard, so she began to elaborate. There were several ways to learn magic, but 2 were the most common. The first was to be taught by a wizard teacher, and the second was to buy magic from a wizard guild. Both methods worked by imprinting the magic mechanism into the mind as a magic circle. Thinking back, Akion remembered seeing a magic circle when he was taught how to appraise things. Misha continued, explaining that even after learning magic, one couldn't use it immediately in battle, especially with attack magic, which had to be quick and precise. One needed practice to get used to it. Sis added that holy magic depended on how well you could communicate with God. That's why those like her had to spend lots of time praying in church. It would take her 7 days to master a new spell. Akion remembered how warriors and wizards used to argue all the time in the capital. Now he kind of understood why. He pretended to get the situation even though it annoyed him. The girls came to town to train, so of course magic came first. But what about him who was supposed to sit around and wait? He asked if they could shorten the wait a little, but Misha said that was impossible. Sis reminded him she needed time to pray too. Akion realized this wasn't working at all. Sure, he wanted some company, but waiting around like this was starting to feel like a waste of time. So he made a proposal. They'd go to the dungeon together only when the timing lined up. If they couldn't, he'd go without them. And if it didn't work out, he'd decline. Then he asked if the girls were okay with that. That night, Akion went home tired with a heavy heart. He recalled how Misha didn't seem to like his conditions, but they agreed to them anyway. He was the one being asked for help, so why did it feel like he was the one compromising? Typical of young people these days. In times like these, the only answer was stress eating. Akion pulled out 20 golden cherries from the game and started binging on them, despite the loud sounds echoing in his head. Days passed, and he kept checking his daily appraisal results. However, his luck didn't change at all. It made him wonder that maybe this luck was just about meeting the right people. Still, there was no point in overthinking it. He originally planned to go solo anyway. If that was the case, he might as well use his new weapon right away. He summoned the iron armor, then headed straight to the dungeon, determined to go as far as he could on his own. Akion reached the dungeon's 6th floor where he used his sprint skill to obliterate countless goblins. He smashed them all, leaving nothing but magic stones. He felt amazing on his 3rd day at the dungeon. Thanks to his new weapons, the attack went quite smoothly. He didn't need to fear bites or bows, and the lack of mobility was covered by his skills. Most importantly, he could use game as much as he wanted when he was alone. Without companions, he only had to worry about the presence of strangers. At that moment, Akion put the magic stones into the game, then went ahead and had a snack while he was at it. Thanks to his skill, he was able to conquer dungeons in luxury. After eating, Akion quickly resumed his mission. He suddenly found a mysterious door and was convinced it was the boss room. He wondered if he should turn around and head home, but he told himself no. It was easier to just do it and not worry too much. Akion soon found himself in a large hall where a vast number of goblins had gathered. He guessed he wouldn't be facing just one, seeing how many there were. He then asked himself how he could defeat them. They were the boss kind, so they must have some kind of skill. Akion suddenly got a brilliant idea: stealing the goblin's skill using Nightmare Deathwalker. However, he was hesitant and he wondered if it worked on monsters. He had only ever used it on humans, but it was worth a try. Akion wasted no time activating Nightmare Deathwalker. He wreaked havoc in the halls, attracting the goblins' attention. As he walked through the pile of goblin corpses, he told the surviving ones that it was finally his turn. Akion's vampire form was pissed, complaining about how he hated wearing the armor. Then out of nowhere, a goblin pierced its spear into Akion, startling him. He smiled and told the goblin to calm down. He said it was rude to attack by surprise, then dissolved into a shadow. Suddenly, the goblin was pierced in the head by its own spear. Akion told the goblins to listen to the master of his body, and they would learn to fight like a vampire. Just then, he used blood transformation paired with blood armor. The goblins were suddenly torn into pieces, while others melted. As Akion held one of the goblins' severed heads, he proclaimed that vampires like him were not like scavengers. They were beings that manipulate life and strive for extremes. He warned the goblins not to forget that. After the chaos had settled, Akion, still in his vampire form, concluded the battle. He told the human Akion to learn some magic, then he might just understand how to counter it. After that, Akion snapped back into his usual self, wondering what the heck had just happened. Akion wondered if the daywalker's behavior resulted from his 8th grader syndrome. Just then, he realized that his vampire self had a different personality, and he knew a lot about vampires and used techniques he didn't know about. Certainly, that was something that came to mind. Just then, he asked himself if there was any point in thinking about it now. He suddenly remembered the skills, so he checked his stats. The number of skills had increased so much, which meant that skill theft wasn't limited to humans. He now had the enhanced fertility skill. Akion grew worried, thinking that he had no dating experience. Even if he had it, it would be useless. He was tense, wondering if it was possible for him not to use such a skill. To his luck, he was able to seal it, which he didn't even know he could do. Bro unlocked enhanced fertility and immediately went celibate. Not long after, Akion collected all the magic stones. Eager about the money he would make, his eyes suddenly landed on a pouch on the ground, and he speculated it was a magical item because it had been dropped with the stones. He appraised it and found that it was a low-grade magic pouch that could store items up to 125,000 L in capacity. Akion was surprised that it was about the size of a one-room apartment. He couldn't reveal it in public when he used game, so the pouch was a huge help. Akion quickly attached the pouch to his belt and he found that it looked cool. Suddenly, he thought about using the magic he got from stealing skills. He used Fire Arrow, and a ball of flame suddenly crashed onto a nearby wall, creating a huge dent. Akion finally understood Misha. If he didn't let the magic get used to his body, it would be useless. Now that he thought about it, the 7 days were almost up, and it was about time to meet up with the girls. At that moment, Akion realized how comfortable he was with being alone. However, he was committed, and there was something fun about being in a party. With that in mind, Akion decided to return to town. He noticed that he arrived early, so he decided to exchange the magic stones while he waited for the girls. Suddenly, Misha called out to Akion, and to his shock, a young man had joined the team. Misha apologized, saying that she wanted to disband because they had decided to party with the young man instead. Akion stuttered, asking why. Just then, Sis bluntly replied that the young man was stronger than him. Akion simply accepted their reasons, and he pretended to be alright and said it couldn't be helped. Misha was relieved, knowing he would understand. Not long after, Misha clung onto the young man's arms, saying they were off to the dungeon. Sis, on the other hand, simply said goodbye. Akion waved back, not saying anything more. Just then, an old man patted Akion on the shoulder, telling him to cheer up because young people were bound to be selfish. Akion said he was alright, though he didn't even know the man. Surprisingly, Akion was not that shocked. In fact, he was glad that one of his concerns was gone. He guessed his mind had also gotten stronger, as seen by how he handled the situation. Just then, the man told Akion that he used to be in a party too, but he had a terrible experience. Meanwhile, Akion wished that the girls didn't break up the party in public because people were now starting to gossip. Later on, Akion exchanged his magic stones for cash. The attendant noticed that he had a magic pouch. Then she offered to get a basket for Akion's stones. She handed them to him, and to her shock, Akion filled it with a huge pile of magic stones. The attendant guessed he had saved up for a long time, then reassured Akion that she would have it ready in a minute. Meanwhile, Akion stood confused, wondering if he had done something wrong. All of Akion's stones totaled to 600,000, surprising him because he didn't even know he could get that much. The attendant thought it was natural because it was the result of his hard work. However, she asked him to send the stones more frequently next time because it took a lot of preparation on her end. Just then, the old man from earlier approached Akion, saying he was an amazing guy. He shared that he felt sorry for the girls because they didn't have the foresight to value Akion. He then laughed, saying Akion should have just said he got rid of the girls. Akion laughed awkwardly, though he did feel a bit lighter. After all, he had always been the one to get thrown away. "Aw, my Shayla." On the days when Akion felt tired from all the things he had done, he must eat something delicious. On that very day, he ate hot pork cutlet and soft egg mixed with broth. If one ate it with rice, they wouldn't be able to think about anything else. Akion expressed his gratitude after finishing his meal, then proceeded to play. His inventory maintenance was done, and he won't be going to the dungeon the next day. With that in mind, he decided to keep on playing until he fell asleep. The next day, Akion had eye bags because he went a little overboard with playing. He had no plans for the day, so he came to the mess for breakfast. He had Japanese food the other day, so having bread and soup for breakfast was the right choice. As he started eating, he basked in the warmth that he felt in his stomach. Just then, everybody started murmuring that the Feathers of Steel party had entered the vicinity. The Flame Blade happened to be around too. Akion's eyes widened, wondering if they were famous parties. Nearby, a guy invited his friend to bet which one of them could conquer the 30th floor first. The guy's friend wanted to support the young lady Ilaria, so he was definitely going to go with Feathers of Steel. Akion was in awe that there were so many young people in famous parties. One girl had a similar vibe to Zira, making him wonder if she were from a warrior family. Akion brushed the thought aside because it wasn't his business. Then he left the establishment. He didn't have anything planned for the day, so he thought about what he could do. First, he needed to gather information on Trents, then prepare for the next dungeon. He was also thinking about buying some magic. At that moment, Akion realized just how much he had to do. Shortly after, he asked the guild attendant about Trents. She then revealed to him that Trents appeared on the 30th floor and they were difficult monsters to challenge alone. She added that the highest record in the city was the 40th floor of Hero's Sword, but he could also negotiate with Feathers of Steel or Flameblade, who were planning to reach the 30th floor. The attendant added that the guild would be happy if Akion could submit a request. Akion was a bit awkward, and he said he would have to consider it first. As he walked around town, he realized he was already halfway through, considering that he was on the 15th floor. He had the skills, but if he gave it a try and it didn't work, he would have to consider issuing a commission. Just then, he spotted the magic shop where the merchant warmly greeted him. She asked if it were Akion's first time and he said yes. She then gave him a brief explanation about the shop, where he could buy and learn spells. She then gave him a list, telling him that the magic he could purchase varied depending on the rank on his registration card. If there was any magic he didn't understand, he should take his time, and she would explain it to him. Akion thanked the merchant and quickly went through the list. Akion was torn between the various options, but he chose the ones used in the RPG games that he played. The merchant recited the 7 spells that Akion chose, which totaled 300,000L. Akion was shocked by how expensive it was, and he finally understood why Fomeri said he owed her. After Akion paid for the magic, the merchant went on to start imprinting the magic circle in his mind. She reassured Akion that if it hurt, it was alright for him to scream. Akion was confused. Then he suddenly started screaming. After the procedure, he rubbed his head, thinking that he didn't expect it to hurt that much. It didn't hurt back when Lady Fomeri did it, making him wonder if there were better and worse ways to imprint magic. When he reached his room, he immediately gave his magic a try. To his surprise, he created glowing orbs that floated. He was amazed, as he didn't need candles anymore. Akion thought he changed a lot since he decided to enjoy adventuring. He had met and partied with a lot of people in town, but he was still alone in his room with a controller in his hand. He told himself that someday he would be able to play games with someone else. That is the end of the recap at chapter 14.2. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.